Well, Sao Paulo, with more than 11 million people, will host the opening game of the Football World Cup next year. In Rio, the host city of the Olympics in 2016, there's also been outrage over the brutal gang rape of a tourist and the bashing of her boyfriend. And they were forced to then withdraw money from cash machines after that assault. So with the world spotlight firmly on Brazil, how is it coping with this level of international scrutiny? I want to talk about that now with Bruno Garces from BBC Mundo Service and Sahil Sachdev, who's a senior strategist at Saffron Brand Consultants, which has just opened an office, incidentally, in Sao Paulo and works with the country on its branding. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. And I'll start with you, Bruno. This is really not the picture that we tend to get of Brazil. It's not the image that the country projects of itself. We think of Copacabana and Caipirinhas and samba, but there's a very different reality, isn't there?
Yeah, well, it is a PR disaster, no doubt about that. But it's also a very true reality of Brazil that you cannot brush aside and that tourists have to be wary about, because violence is still endemic in big urban centers in Brazil, be them Rio, Sao Paulo, or other ones. And still, there needs to be done much to cope with this strong violence.
Sahil, do you agree this is, the past few months have been a PR disaster, not only from the difficulty in even getting the stadium ready, now you have these incredible acts of violence that put Brazil on the map for the wrong reasons.
It's absolutely true, and I think it's very true that your reputation and the country's brand, as we understand it, is driven not necessarily by what you say, but rather by what you do. The reality on the ground is inevitably going to drive how people perceive it.
So how difficult is the challenge for those of you who have this responsibility to help build the Brazilian brand when things like this make the news?
It doesn't make it easier, certainly. I think that it is true that these kind of things, unfortunately and tragic as they are, do happen all over the world. It happens to be that Brazil's under a greater degree of scrutiny than probably at any time in its history. So it's a two-way street. It does provide a fantastic opportunity for them to project a sense of what it wants to be known for, beyond the sort of cliched understanding that most of us think about countries in, like carnival, samba, and so on. But it does mean that issues like this do make it onto global news programs where it wouldn't in the past. I think what we would say is that step one is to ensure that the response to this is seen as fair and in line with how people expect international standards of justice to be applied. So in the short term, the response, carefully managed, can in fact outweigh some of the negative PR that's arisen from it.
Bruno, we're talking about this now, but is it fair to say that to some extent Brazilians have become accustomed to and perhaps even desensitized to this kind of violence or even indifference on the part of police?
Sadly so, I'm afraid. I think these are recurrent facts. We've seen loads of them. Especially, Brazil has been, the São Paulo police has been accused of involvement in extrajudicial killings for quite a long while now. It's been years. It has even been reported by the UN. It's not new to it. I think still prevails among sectors of the Brazilian police overall, but São Paulo one in particular, a culture of getting away with this kind of activity, that rogue policemen can do that, and as long as it takes place in downridden areas, in the outskirts of the greater São Paulo, in places where you don't have middle-class restaurants, trendy places or bars. If it had taken place there, maybe the coverage of the media, maybe the attention would have been different. But since it didn't, I think, as Julia mentioned, very sadly, it only obtained the attention that it did because it was broadcast in a program of great audience.
So Sahil, just quickly if you can, because we only have a few seconds, the challenge of the next few months in the run-up to the World Cup, in terms of rebuilding that brand, what does Brazil have to do?
It needs to, in terms of the World Cup in Rio 2016, deliver a fantastic event and events. And I think that allied with some real and tangible reforms, perhaps of the police service, which are projected also outwards, will leave people hopefully with the positive image that Brazil deserves.
Sahil Sachdev with Saffron Brand Consultants just opened up an office in Sao Paulo. Bruno Garces from BBC Mundo, thanks for being with us on Global.
Thank you.